Hey, on Zoom, you hear me all right still? Excellent. All right, Rabbi, say good morning. Good morning. What a schos, Meretz Hashem, to do Daf Gimel Maseches Nazir today. Begin by thanking all of our sponsors. To thank our Talmud Torah sponsors for the month of Shvat. To thank Bracha Strimber for dedicating all the Shirman Drushos this month in memory of her husband, Avram ben Kalman Eliezer Halevi, Zichron Livracha. To thank Ayala and Sarah Steinberg for dedicating all the Shirman Drushos this month in the Schlusa of Shalema for Shulamis Bas Susha. Our Daf Yomi sponsors today, the Ehrenfeld Mishpacha in the Zuchos of David and Yona's great-grandfather, Moshe Avram ben David Zichron Livracha. We hope that in the merit of our Talmud Torah, all of the Neshama Slav and Aliyah, the families in Nechama, and all those who require a refuah should have one together with Kol Cholei Yisrael. Okay, good. Well, so let's begin. So Baruch Hashem, we have a lot to do today, an incredible daf ahead of us. So we'll say, so today's daf is daf Gimel, as I just mentioned. 3. We are picking up on Beis and Beis to be at the two dots. At the two dots, going through our Mishnah. Again, exciting, a very systemic approach to the Mishnah in its entirety. So let's go through case by case. Actually, Meretz Hashem, today we're gonna make it. We're gonna make it to the next Mishnah. Meretz Hashem on Amud Beis. Says the Gemara. So Ehei Noeh Nazir. So we'll say, so one of the examples that the Mishnah gave of a yad, right? Remember, again, we already established the order of the Mishnah of the A, B, B, A model. We explained that the Mishnah is introducing us to the fact that both kinuyim, equivalent terms, as well as yados, partial terms, both work by nidarim. And then we explained that the Mishnah then went on to give a series of examples regarding yados as well as kinuyim. So Ehei Noeh, a person says, I will be beautiful, I'll be beautiful. Ultimately, again, that is an expression of that is a yad, that is a partial declaration, and a person becomes a Nazir. Asks the Gemara, I don't understand. Vidilma, anah lefanav b'mitzvos. I don't understand. Maybe what it means is I will become beautiful before Hashem in the performance of mitzvos. In other words, maybe Ehei Noeh doesn't mean I'm going to be a Nazir. Maybe Ehei Noeh means what? That ultimately, again, I'm going to do mitzvos. And ultimately, again, beautify myself before HaKadosh Baruch Hu in the performance of mitzvahs. After all, again, Kiddushai is beautiful. As learned in the Brayso, Zekir Ivan Veyu. As Klal Yisrael said in the Shira, this is my God, and I will exalt him. What does this refer to? What does it mean, Va'an Vehu? Va'an Vehu literally means I'll beautify him. How do you beautify HaKadosh Baruch Hu? This is incredible. And Noeh Lefanov. I'll just point out over here that the Bach changes the gears over here from Anoah or Enoah to Esnoah. Okay, again, I will Esnoah Lefanav, I'll make myself beautiful before him. B'mitzos. So we'll say, how do you beautify HaKadosh Baruch Hu? Zekeli va'anveyu. How do you make Hashem beautiful? By ultimately, again, beautifying your performance of mitzvos. Namely what? Esel Lefanav Sukkah. I'll make before HaKadosh Baruch Hu a beautiful sukkah. Lulav Noeh, a beautiful lulav. Tzitzis Noeh, beautiful tzitzis. Echtov lefanav Sefer Torah Noeh. I will go ahead and write before him a beautiful Sefer Torah. Va'achrechenu b'shira'in Noem. And I will wrap it in beautiful silk. So I will say this is the concept of Heder Mitzvah. The idea over here is, we'll say that when a person performs a mitzvah and a person has an object of a mitzvah, one doesn't simply utilize an object in which they could technically discharge their obligation, but rather one goes above and beyond to beautify the object of the mitzvah. So it's interesting, the examples that the Gemara gives, right? You could sit in any kind of sukkah, beautify your sukkah. You could discharge your obligation with many different types of even inferior esrogim. Get a beautiful esrog. You can fulfill your obligation with any kind of tzitzis, specifically referring to the strings, beautiful tzitzis. Sefer Torah, we'll point out something very interesting. There's a fundamental machlokes about whether or not there is a mitzvah to write your own Sefer Torah. Very interesting machlokes. What's fascinating from this Gemara, the example that the Gemara gives is, I will write a beautiful Sefer Torah, right? Again, Echtov lefanav Sefer Torah, which seems to clearly indicate that there is a specific mitzvah to actually write your own Sefer Torah. So I'll write a beautiful Sefer Torah. and I will go ahead and wrap it in silk pieces. So we'll say, so the idea over here, the Gemara says, so this is Hidr Mitzvah. I will point out there is so much to talk about in this topic of Hidr Mitzvah, but again, we'll get a little bit weiter. But the point the Gemara is making over here is, I don't understand. I'm standing around, I say, Ehei Noah, I shall be beautiful. So the Mishnah says, it means you're a Nazir. Whoa, why does it mean I'm a Nazir? Maybe I'm making a religious declaration that, you know what, from this point forward, I'm not going to simply get by my performance of mitzvahs. Instead, when it comes to my mitzvahs, I'm going to beautify my mitzvahs. Maybe it's Hidr Mitzvah, to which the Gemara says, Amar Shmuel, Shetafos b'sa'aro v'amar ana. No, what's the case? The case is where I'm holding on to my hair. I don't know why I'm illustrating this on myself, right? I'm holding on to my hair, and I say, ana, I'm going to be beautiful. So the idea I will say is, by the fact that I'm holding on to my hair, and I'm making this statement, by definition, it's clear that the Noah is linked to Nazirus. Incredible. So I will say, so the Gemara says, Nazira, milsa da'avera, va'amrilena. I will say, just before we go on, I'll just mention something very interesting to you. It struck me, this lashon, this sugya of Hidr Mitzvah, this is not the only place, right? We saw it in Yevamis. But remember again, in Yevamis, the lashon is a little bit different. What struck me very much in the lashon of Rabbi Say is the concept of Hidr Mitzvah. When you think about Hidr Mitzvah, so what's Hidr Mitzvah? Hidr Mitzvah is, I could walk in, I could pick up any esrog, right? And I could be Yotzei. What's Hidr Mitzvah? I'm just using the esrog because that's the example over here. What's Hidr Mitzvah? Hidr Mitzvah is, I go in, I look, so hopefully, again, first of all, becoming proficient in the halachas is also part of Hidr Mitzvah, so I know what I'm looking for. But even if I don't know what I'm looking for, I'm going to spend extra money because I want a nicer esrog. It matters. It matters that I'm investing. So when you think about Hidr Mitzvah, it's almost as if what the mitzvah is a greater investment. And sometimes it's a financial investment, sometimes it's a time investment, but it's a greater investment in the mitzvah. I'm physically beautifying the mitzvah. So what struck me last night when I was looking at this Gemara is if you look at the lashon of the Gemara again, it says, Zekeli vanveyu and noah lefanav b'mitzvos. I will make myself beautiful in front of Hashem with mitzvos. As lefanav sukkah noah. Lifreit lulav noah. Tzitzis the echtav lefanav. What do you keep seeing over here? You keep seeing that part of Hidr Mitzvah, we'll say, and I think that's what Chazal are trying to express to us as well. Part of the Hidr is not just spending more money on the mitzvah. Part of the Hidr is that when I do the mitzvah, I feel lefanav. I feel in front of HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Chavra, we all know, there are two ways. I can go through a whole day of doing mitzvahs, and not feel any semblance of spiritual connection. Why? Because I'm just running around, like I'm just doing a whole bunch of stuff. So I'm fulfilling my obligations. I'm checking the boxes, but I'm not developing relationship. See, I will say, there's an element of Hidr Mitzvah, not just in the financial investment in the physical object of the mitzvah, but there's an element of Hidr Mitzvah in the manner of performance as well. You could perform a mitzvah stam, or you could perform a mitzvah lefanav. You could perform a mitzvah in a way where the Ribono Shel Olam, I am standing before you as I take this esrog. I'm standing before you as I sit in this sukkah. I'm standing before you as I learn my Torah. Any time that you inject an element of lefanav, I'm serving before you, HaKadosh Baruch Hu. That's Hidr Mitzvah. See, we often think of Hidr Mitzvah as, all right, I won't buy the $50 esrog, I'll buy the $75 esrog. Okay, good, that's fantastic, right? When I'm going to put on my tzitzis, I'm going to get the tzitzis, with nicer strings. Okay. Of course, that is Hidr Mitzvah, not a shayla. But there's a relationship Hidr as well. I could just do what I'm supposed to do with absolutely no connection, or I could live my life as a Jew, do my mitzvahs, lefanav. I stand before you, I serve before you. This mitzvah brings me right next to you. That relationship component, that emotional investment of being lefanav in the performance of a mitzvah, ein hidr gedola mizo. That's Hidr Mitzvah. Not just relegating mitzvahs to behavioral acts, but recognizing that mitzvahs are building blocks of relationships and allowing myself to feel that amplified relationship. That's Hidr Mitzvah. So the Gemara goes back to, I don't understand. So now we're saying, hey Noah, I should be beautiful. ultimately again is Nazir. So the Gemara says, but one second, here's the problem. Nazira, Milsa Davera. So we're going to get into this, and this is going to be, I just want to tell you, I'm very excited about Nazir. There's so much exciting stuff ahead of us in Nazir. It's absolutely incredible. So Nazira, Milsa Davera. One second. Bossy, you know also the best part? You know how you feel like at the beginning of a Masechta, right? What goes through your mind at the beginning of a Masechta? I'm sorry? Is there a Gadata? Okay. Fair point, right? Is there? Okay, I'll tell you what's in your mind, right? At the beginning of Masechta. I'll tell you what's in my mind at the beginning of Masechta. I'll say, when I was starting Masechta, I'm like, you know what? This time, I'm really going to understand everything. Because you know what happens, like over the course of Daf Yomi, just because of the speed also, I come to accept the fact that there are certain things I'm just not going to chap. I'm just not going to get. And like when you start something new, especially you had like a daf base that we had, which was such a methodical daf, right? In other words, there was nothing esoteric, nothing like complicated. Like it was very straight, a lot of steps, very, very straightforward. There's this feeling of like, I can make this mine. I can actually make this mine. Like this, okay, take a deep breath. I'm not going to start making promises of chazara because I've done that for the last, 3 cycles. So right, so I'm not going to say. But again, but I could hold in this, right? I could retain this. I could remember this, and it's such an exciting feeling when you feel like actually you have the capacity not just to learn something but make something yours. So in any event, the Mishnah says over here, I don't understand. We're going to get into this, but Nazirus says an Aveira. Nazirus is an Aveira. Now, we're going to talk about why Nazirus is an Aveira. It's a big machlokes. And yet, ultimately, again, you're saying it's beautiful. So I'm saying I should be beautiful. And now we're saying, oh, that's an Ed Nazirus. But Nazirus is not beautiful. We're going to see that there are opinions that hold that Nazirus is an actual Aveira, that one should abstain and not do it. So how can you say, hey, Noah should be beautiful, is Nazirus, type of Gimel, in Dafil Rabbi Eliezer HaKafar, the Amar Nazir Chote, even according to Rabbi Eliezer HaKafar, who says ultimately again that a neder, person who takes a neder Nazirus is a chote, is a sinner. Now again, I will say, this goes back also to Nedarim, in terms of any time you go ahead and restrict additional things upon yourself. Chazal didn't like it. HaKadosh Baruch Hu doesn't like it. Okay, again, we'll delve into this. Where is this? This is later on your test. Okay, so we have a couple of weeks, 2 weeks until we get to this. Rabbi Eliezer HaKafar, who says that a person who takes a neder Nazirus is a sinner, Hanimili, this is incredible, Gabi Nazir Tameh. This is so fascinating. I will say, again, we're going to do this sugya later on, so I'm just giving you coming attractions over here. It could very well be that even Rabbi Eliezer HaKafar holds that a Nazir is a chote, holds in what case is he a chote? When he becomes tameh. Now I will say, we're going to talk about this as well. What happens when a Nazir becomes tameh? Simple case, right? Nazir's minding his own business. Somebody dies, right in front of him under the same roof. So what happens? He becomes tameh to masmeis. What happens? Nazir Nazirus is done, and he has to start all over. Now, both say that's a big blow to the Nazir, right? Because Lamaisa, again, you undertook something for a certain amount of time, confident that you could maintain certain behavioral strictures and limitations for a certain amount of time. Now, suddenly, the whole clock is restarted. Rabbi Eliezer HaKafar says, if you become tameh, that's when you become a chote. Why? Listen to this. Da'idi deboy mitzar. So what's going to happen? L'maisa, when you become tameh, the first days are kind of voided, and you have are voided, and you have to start all over again. So what's going to happen? Hasam hu dilma asi leme avid al niziruse. Say the concern over here is that when you become tameh, and now you have to start all over, what's going to occur? Probably you're going to mess up. Now, why are you probably going to mess up? Because Lamaisa, again, now you're stuck with a whole new prolonged term. So we'll say, take a look at Rashi for just a moment. Rashi says over here, Dilma asila me'avad al nazirus. You may come to transgress your nazirus. We'll say first short line. Kidarim parakama de nedarim kishein mitamin v'rabin alein. Often when a nazir becomes tameh, and now again, he has to observe so many additional days of nazirus. So what happens? So Rabbi Alein Yimei Tuma mischarotin bahen. This is incredible. So I will say, when you read the Gemara, you think that what Rabbi Eliezer HaKafar is saying is like this. The problem was with the Nazir Tameh. What's going to happen with the Nazir Tameh? He becomes Tameh. Now he's Nazir, say, at least for what? We'll call it another 30 days. So what's going to end up happening? He's going to end up transgressing. drinking wine, going to levayas, right? Whatever he's going to end up doing, transgressing. Rashi says there's a different concern over here. The concern about say is that when he now has a new prolonged term of Nazirus, what's going to occur? Listen to this. Mischarotin bahen. They will say, what's going through the Nazir's mind the moment that he becomes Tamei Tumas Meis and now has to renew the term? What goes through his mind? Should have never done this. Should have never. Look what Rashi says. V'nimtzu mevi'en chulin la'azara. And I will say, what's the problem? The problem is now if he has remorse. Oh, so 1 second. I will say, this is charata. What does charata do to a neder? What does charata do to a neder? Right? It can ultimately, again, undo it. So it turns out that according to, listen to the words of Rashi, it turns out that at the end of his neder Naziros, when he ends up bringing karbanos to the Beis HaMikdash, it's like bringing chulin la'azara. And I will say, chulin la'azara means you're not allowed to bring illegal karbanos to the Beis HaMikdash, and doing so is a very serious transgression. So it sounds like what Rashi saying over here is like this: the Nazir becomes tamei, he then regrets ever having made the neder Naziros, but behaviorally he's still going to go and comply. When he brings his karbanos, it's going to be a problem of chulin la'azara, unconsecrated offerings coming to the Beis HaMikdash. Now, Bosai, the Rush comes along. We missed the Rush a little bit. Go to the Rush in the left-hand corner. The Rush says something very interesting. He says, "Shelo yuchal lisbol meshech zman de Nazirus." He's not going to be able to sustain this prolonged Nazirus. V'gam toa al Naziruso. He's upset that he ever took this neder to begin with. V'gam toa al Naziruso. The karbanos of krovim lihios chulin ba'azara. So the Rush just qualifies this, I will say. It's not literally, remember again, having remorse about a neder, right? Having remorse in your head about a neder, does that undo the neder? No. Again, charata works. How does charata work? As a function of hatara, right? If you go to a chacham, we saw this in Nedarim. So it's interesting. So Rashi makes it sound like that because he has remorse about the neder, it's going to make it like he's bringing chulun la'azara. So the Rashi says, no. It's ki'ilu. It's as if. It's of course, it's not literal chulun la'azara. The point over here is, this is not a good situation. The guy feels stuck in prolonged Nazirus. The longer the Nazirus goes on, the more the probability that he's going to do something wrong in it. Furthermore, again, he regrets having ever made this neder, and that regret makes it like it's chulin ba'azara. Is it chulin ba'azara? No, but it's like. So I will say, so therefore the Gemara says, that's when Rabbi Lazar HaKafar says that a Nazir is a chotei. Ultimately, again, when you become tamei, now you have to start the whole thing over. That's when Nazirus becomes sinful. Because in that situation, again, you have prolonged Nazirus, greater probability you're going to mess up, you're upset, you have charat, you ever took this on yourself to begin with. However, Rav Nazir Tar, lav chote karibeh. I will say, but a person who's a Nazir Tar, right, a regular Nazir, Rabbi Lazar HaKafar says, he is not a chote. And I will say, that's going to be the subject of dispute as well. Right? We're going to talk about that because there definitely is a school of thought that says any Nazir is considered to be a chote. Again, I will say, there's going to be this great dialectic in Nazirus. Is a Nazir a kadosh or is a Nazir a chote? That's going to be a fundamental machlokes. In any event, so just to tie this up. So therefore, again, when a person says, Ehei noah, I'll be beautiful, I shall be beautiful, that is a yad. That's a partial declaration that makes him a Nazir, provided that what? He's holding on to his hair. So again, that's what I'll say. You begin to see this, you begin to see the theme developing. These yados work when you create some type of situational proof or some type of you bolster it with some type of situational reality, right? So again, you're holding on your hair and you say, "Hey, no, good." That's the yad for Nazirus. Beautiful. Next case. Harini kazeh, right? I say I want to be like that guy. I want to be like that guy. So I'll say, so now again, the Mishnah also said, Harini kazeh is what? Is a yad, and therefore I become a Nazir. Says the Gemara, 1 second. Nihi nami ditafas pesaro. So the Gemara says, Harini kazeh lo amar. So I understand what I'll say. Even if you want to take what we said before, let's say again, I'm holding on to my hair, and I say Harini kazeh. So I will say, so what does that mean? I'm saying I should be like my hair. Harini kazeh should be like my hair. In other words, it's a nonsensical statement. So how is that a yad to make me into a Nazir? So again, Nihi Nami, even if you want to say the toughest Pisaro, that I'm holding on to my hair, and I say Harini Kazeh, I should be like this, Lo Amar. I will say such a statement seems to be irrelevant. So why is that he had to make me a Nazir? Amar Shmuel, kigon shahaya Nazir over lefanav. No, again, once again, I will say we have a situational. I'm sorry. We have a situational reality. In this case over here, the Nazir is working for it. I will say, I just want to point out something very interesting. If you notice that yad of Nazirus is a little bit different than the yad that we saw by Nedarim, right? Often the yad by Nedarim works without any of these circumstantial bolsterings, right? If you notice, Nazirus is very interesting that you need, in other words, the yad by itself is not enough, which makes sense also, I will say, because also I want to point out, these are yadayim she'enon mochichos. So remember again, we spoke about this actually yesterday's daf as well. These are yadayim she'enon mochichos, right? This is an inconclusive yad. Someone says, hey kazeh, what does that mean? Harini no'eh, what does that mean? So when you have such open-ended yados, you do require some type of situational clarification. Good. Say if a person says, Harini kazeh, I'm like this guy, that works as long as what? There is a Nazir walking right in front of me. Beautiful. Harini misalsel. Harini misalsel. Now I will say, so what does misalsel mean? So mimai dahadin silsel sara. So I will say, so misalsel sounds like something to do with my hair, right? I'm growing out my hair. Misalsel. In other words, we don't know the exact definition of misalsel yet, but whatever it is, it sounds like something with my hair. So if I say harini misalsel, that's a yad also for a Nazir. So mimai dahadin silsel sara. How do you know that silsel refers to hair? Rabbi say this is great. This is great. So the maidservant of Rabbi, Rabbi say, this is the Gemara Maseches Megillah. So the maidservant of Rabbi was a very pious woman. And in fact, there were many things that the students of Rabbi learned from the maidservant of Rabbi. So remember again, it was the maidservant of Rabbi who was also responsible for Rebbe's ultimate demise. Remember the dramatic story that Rebbe was suffering from some type of significant gastrointestinal illness. Dr. Rosenblum, this would be like a good thesis or something, like some type of paper. No, because it's fascinating. What in other words, I don't know what he was suffering. He was suffering from, but something that was deathly. It wasn't just like a discomfort thing, it was a serious situation that he was dealing with. So remember again the famous Maisa. So they're davening for Rebbe. There's like a tefillah gathering outside of the home. So the maidservant sees that it's the tefillos of the rabbin that are keeping Rebbe alive, but in Shema, it's clear that in Shema they're trying to bring Rebbe's in the Shema back. So there was this tug of war between the earth and the heavens for Rebbe. So remember, what does she do? She takes the earthenware vessel, throws it out the window, it lands on the ground and it cracked. In that moment when it shattered, the noise was startling. People stopped davening for a second, and in that moment, Rebbe died. So this was a very, very pious woman. So listen to this. So one time, the maidservant of Rebbe, she said, Lahu Gavra, Ad Masa Tamasalsa B'Sarecha. The other thing the maidservant used to do is the maidservant used to give musar. She used to give musar to the Talmidim, to the students of Rebbe when they would come to the house. So one time she said to one of the students, how much time are you going to spend Masalsa B'Sarecha playing with your hair? Right? So she gave the guy musar about spending too much time on his hair. So what do you see from here? That silsel has to do with grooming your hair. So therefore, if a person says, Harini misalsel, that's ultimately, again, an expression of Nazirus, and it becomes a Nazir. I am a Torah. Maybe I will say, maybe Harini misalsel is a reference ultimately, again, to undertaking greater diligence learning Torah. After all, the Ksiv, salsala utro memeka. So we'll say, the Gemara over here is quoting the pasuk from Mishlei, salsala utro memeka. So we'll say, what does that mean? So actually, if you take a look at Rashi's actually right across the Emar Torah, Dichi Amar Harini Misalsel Shemekabel Alav Lilmod Torah. We'll see maybe Harini Misalsel is actually a commitment to learn Torah with greater diligence. How? We'll say the word salsala means I will turn it over, right? I will investigate Uteroma Mecca, and I will lift it up. So Rashi says over here, She'ehei mahapech ba. So we'll say the lashon of salsala means I'm going to really delve into my learning. really delve into it, right? Let's say the whole idea, salsa also means like to curl. It's the whole idea when you curl, right? What do? You get into your hair and you curl it. So salsa also means I get into my Torah. I get into my Torah. So maybe that's what it means. Many haredi misalsal is not a commitment to become a Nazir, but it's a commitment for greater diligence in Torah study. Amar Shmuel hachanami shetafas besaro. Once again, I will say, what's the case? I'm holding on to my hair and I say haredi misalsal. Okay, so once again, you have a statement that is a reference to hair, right? And you're holding on to hair. That becomes a proper expression, ultimately, again, to become a Nazir. Incredible. Harini mekalkel. Or mechalkel. We'll say, what does this mean? So once again, this is an expression of Nazirus. Mimai dahadein kilkul sarahu. We'll say, how do you know that the lashon of kilkul is a lashon? It has to do with hair. So the Gemara says, kidisnan sid. We'll say, very interesting. Halach and hilchos Shabbos. So we'll say, we know from our Shabbos days, hotzah. Hotzah is the prohibition or the malacha that you are not allowed to transport an item from one domain to another, or for that matter, dalar amis and shusarabin. Now remember again, in order to be chayiv for hotzah, there has to be a minimum shear, a minimum amount of the item which you are transporting. There has to be a minimum amount. So what is the minimum amount? I will say, sid is like lime or plaster, right? What's the minimum amount of lime or plaster for which you are chayiv for transporting on Shabbos? Rabbi Yehuda Omer, kedei lasud kilkul, enough to go ahead and smear kilkul. What's kilkul? Of Amar Rav Bas Tzid'ah. It refers to the temples. I will say, this sid, this plaster, was also used as a depilatory to remove hair. So women would remove hair, unwanted hair from their temples, right? So you see from here that what? You see kedei kilkul. I will say kilkul means the hair on the temples. So you see from here that lashon of kilkul is a lashon of hair. Therefore, if a person says hareni mechalkel, right? Ultimately, again, what is that? What is that? That's an expression of Naziros. Incredible. I ema mezun inu aniye. Maybe I will say, maybe it actually means, maybe when a person is already mechalkel, he's actually taking upon himself a neder to support the poor. Now, we'll say, why? Or making a statement to support the poor. Kid l'chsiv, v'echalkel Yosef es aviv, v'es echov. We'll say the pasuk says that Yosef supported his family. Right? Yosef supported his father and his brothers. So we'll say, so maybe that's what it means. Right? Maybe, again, it's not an expression of Nazirus, but ultimately it's an expression of tzedakah, to which the Gemara says, Amar Shmuel hachanami shetafos besaro. Okay, we'll say same idea. You're right. A lot of these expressions could be interpreted in more than one way, but lamaisa, when made at the same time as holding one's hair, halacha lamaisa, that act, that behavioral act, gives the neder is context. Incredible. Hare alai l'shaleach pera, hare ze nadir. So if a person says, I'm going to grow out my hair, that is a neder nazirus. This is a little bit more explicit. So the Gemara says, Mimai dahadin shiluach ribuyahu. Now, both say, here's what's interesting. Literally translated, what is he saying? Hare alai l'shaleach pera. I'm going to send forth the growth. So how do you know sending forth means growing, right? Growing, extension, right? Ribuya, increase. Tichsev, because the pasuk says, quoting over here, the pasuk from Shir Hashirim, Shalachayich pardes rimonim. Shalachai pardes rimonim. So we'll say, so literally again it means, I will amplify, right, your orchard of pomegranates. So the Gemara says, Ema. So the point over here is, you see from me that Shalachayich means to grow. So Ema midi davure, maybe it means not to grow, but something that passes over. The Kidichsiv, V'shaleach mayim al pnei chutzos. He sends forth the water on the plains. So we'll say what that's referring to is the sheeting of the water. So that's not the growth of the water, but that's the flow of the water. Tana pera yalif. There's gzir shava of pera. What's the gzir shava? Ksiv hacha says over here, kadosh gadol pera, says by Nazir, ultimately again, the growth of his hair will be kadosh. Ksiv hasam, gabi koin hedyot, upera lo yishalechu. They should not allow their hair to grow too much. So we'll say, see from here, that para ultimately means growth. Another possibility is, Hai sholeach mayim nami ribuyahu. This sholeach also doesn't just simply mean sheeting, but rather it also means growth or amplification. Why? The Gemara says, Dikad mashkin maya lepera Rabbi, because what happens when the water feeds the crops, so the water feeds the fruits, what happens to them? They grow. Sefer Rabbi said the Gemara has successfully shown that Lamaisa, again, the lashon of shalach means growth. So therefore, when a person says Harei alai l'shaleach pera, what are they saying? I'm going to grow my hair, and I'm going to grow my hair. Ultimately, is a statement of Nazir. So I will say, what you'll notice, by the way, over here is something very interesting. What doesn't the Gemara say that you need in this case? What doesn't it say you need? To be holding on to your hair. So you begin to see a theme. Why? Because this statement is already a yan muchach, right? This already, again, it's much clearer what I'm talking about over here. Because para, also remember again, is a lashon of hair. We find that lashon of para by a Nazir. We find lashon of meaning hair. We find lashon of para by a Kohen meaning hair. And shalach is a lashon of growth. So already again, this is a yad mochiach. This is a much more almost like self-explanatory partial declaration. So already again over here, you don't need the situational amplification of holding onto the hair. Very interesting. Good. Let's go back. Tarei alai tziporin. Shabbat said this great sugya. Person says, I hereby take upon myself birds. That's what he's saying, right? I take upon myself to bring birds. So Rabbi Meir says he's a Nazir. The Chachamim say, lashon of the Chachamim was, he's not a Nazir. Chachamim inu Nazir. All right, so what's going on over here? So it's my time, Rabbi Meir. So what says great? What's Rabbi Meir's logic? So literally all I'm saying is, I hereby take upon myself birds. Right? Tarei alai, birds are upon me. So what's the pshat? Why does Rabbi Meir say that I'm a Nazir? Listen to this. What's incredible? So Gemara says, my time, Rabbi Meir, Reish Lakish, siporin smuchin l'seyar. Kibel alav. It says great. So I will say, what kind of birds? When I say Harei alai tziporin, what kind of birds am I accepting upon myself? The birds that are mentioned in the same context as hair. As hair. What are the birds that are mentioned in the same context as hair? So the Gemara says, when it quotes the pasuk, it's actually quite interesting. Quotes the pasuk in Sefer Daniel. So we'll say the Navi over here is describing what happened to Nebuchadnezzar. Right? Nebuchadnezzar ultimately goes insane, and he begins to think that he's an animal, right? He lives like an animal. So the Navi here describes ultimately again like what happened in Adi Sare Kinishrin. Ultimately again, right? His hair became thick, right? Like the feathers of eagles. V'tarfoi kitziporin, his nails became like claws. Now, the Gemara doesn't quote the part of the pasuk that's meaningful for us. And what happens? And v'tarfoi kitziporin, right? Kitziporin, I'm sorry, right? And his nails became like claws of birds. So I will say, the idea over here is that birds are mentioned in the same context as hair. Now I will say, so listen to what's happening over here. Take a look. Actually, not yet. Actually, take a look at Rashi. So watch this. So Rabbi Meir is saying like this. Here's the case. I say, Harei alai tziporin. Birds are upon me. Rabbi Meir says, that is a neder naziros. So now Rish Lakish has explained Rabbi Meir. How is that a neder naziros? Because when I say birds, what am I really saying? I'm talking about the birds that are mentioned in proximity to hair. Okay, take a look at Rashi. Just take this step by step. Where are birds mentioned in proximity to hair? Daniel ad di sare kincharn rabba v'tarfoi kitzipurin titzipurin v'seyar bechad krok sivi. Birds and hair are mentioned in one pasuk. Birds and hair are mentioned in one pasuk. So when I say Harei alai tziporin, birds are upon me, I'm referring to the birds mentioned in the same pasuk as hair. Okay, well, what does that have to do with anything? So watch this. Remeir Savar, so we'll say, so now, this is very important. So now, when in Judaism, right, when in Torah, when in mitzvahs, is there a connection between birds and hair? And the answer is Naziros. Because what happens by Neder Naziros? You have to grow out your hair, and at the conclusion of your Neder Naziros, what do you have to do? You have to bring birds as part of your offering. You have to bring birds. So the Maisa, that's what's happening over here. So when I say Harei alai tziporin, Rabbi Meir understands that to mean, I'm taking upon myself the birds, so to speak, mentioned in conjunction with hair. So really what am I saying? I'm growing out my hair. That's really what I'm saying. But instead of saying growing out my hair, I say, birds are upon me because I'm referencing the birds that are mentioned in the same pasuk as hair. Rosa, you see this and you're like, just say you're a Nazir, right? Just come on, right? So again, fine. But the Maisa will say this actually yields an incredible statement. Now watch this. The Gemara says Rameir Sabar, because Rameir holds matfis inish b'midi disamechle. Shabbos say the whole chap of this is Rameir holds that Allah Maisa, you can make a binding statement using a word or a term that is juxtaposed to another meaningful statement or another meaningful word. In other words, Shabbos say, at the end of the day, what's driving this yad? Why does this work? Because the birds that are mentioned in the same pasuk as what? As hair. So what's really driving this neder is the hair. Rabbi Meir holds that essentially you can make a binding statement by using a word that appears in proximity or is juxtaposed to another meaningful term. In this case, the word birds appears in the same pasuk is juxtaposed to hair, and therefore when I say bird, I'm really able to ride the coattails of the hair. That's right, Meir Shita. Take a look at the last Rashi on the daf. Rashi says over here, this is why he said siporin. Why did he say birds? Because we'll say ultimately, again, remember the pasuk itself. Now, there's one more piece, by the way. I should really clarify this. The pasuk doesn't just talk about hair. What does it talk about? Growth of hair, unchecked growth of hair, right? Nebuchadnezzar's hair had become very long. So the birds are mentioned in the same context as long hair. So therefore, when I said birds, Rabbi Meir says what I was really focusing on was the long hair. Nazir over. So I will point out, so let's stop over just a second, by pause. So according to Reish Lakish, what's unfolding here is like this, right? Meir Shita is Adam or matfis inish b'midi disamechle. That you could use a word to generate an eder, and as long as that word is juxtaposed to another meaningful term, it's as if you stated the meaningful term. So when you say Hare alait siporin, what we look at that as siporin is juxtaposed to long hair in Daniel. So what you're really saying is what? Long hair is upon me, which is a neder nazirus. And I both say, Rashi comes along and says, one second, look at the last line of Rashi, will see, Ukigon, Shahayir Nazir over Lefanov, Otafas Bisaro. Very interesting. So Rashi says, but let's be clear. A situation like this requires some type of situational clarification. So when does this work? And as I will say, if a person says, Harei Alait Siporin, when can you interpret that to mean? Harei Alait Siporin, right? Really, birds are upon me really means long hair is upon me. Why? Because birds are mentioned in the same pasuk as long hair. When is that true? L'maisa, when there's either a Nazir walking in front of me or I'm holding on to my hair. So there needs to be some type of situational clarification. For Rabbanon Amud Beis, Rabbanon Savri, the Rabbanon on the other hand hold, Lo matfis inish b'midi disamachle. Rabbanon say, the Rabbanon reject this principle. Very interesting. The Rabbanon reject this principle because the Rabbanon hold at the end of the day, you can't go ahead and make an neder using a term that's juxtaposed to another term in a pasuk, and now suddenly it's as if you articulated the juxtaposed term. There's no concept like that exists. Take a look at that Rashi. No. When you say birds are upon me, I'll say, what does birds upon me mean? Rabbanon say, I don't know what birds upon me means. Right? I actually don't know what that means. And therefore, again, it is not a valid neder nazira. So we'll say, according to Reish Lakish, the fundamental machlokes Rameir and the Rabbanon is actually in a principle, in an exegetical principle of matfis inish b'midei desamechle. Can a person make a neder using one term that is juxtaposed to another meaningful term in a pasuk, and therefore it's as if you use the juxtaposed term in the articulation or formation of the neder? Rameir says yes. Therefore, when I say harei alai tziporim, I'm actually not saying harei alai tziporim. What am I saying? Harei alai, long hair, and it works. The Rabbanon say there's no such concept like that. Therefore, when you say Harei alait siporim, what are you saying? There are birds upon me. But Lamaisa, again, birds upon me is not a relevant statement, and therefore halacha Lamaisa doesn't do anything. Good. So we'll say that's Rabbi Meir's interpretation of the machlokes. Rabbi Yochanan says no. The kuli alma lo matvis. Rabbi Yochanan says like this. What's incredible? Rabbi Yochanan says in reality, everyone agrees that you cannot go ahead making a neder based on juxtaposed terms. He can't. In other words, you can't. No one says that when you see Harei Alayt Tziporim, Harei Alayt Tziporim really refers to the long hair mentioned in the pasuk in Daniel. No one agrees to that principle. Ella, so we'll say, so what is Rabbi Meir's logic where he says Harei Alayt Tziporim is a valid neder nazirus? So they can listen to this. Ella, Rabbi Meir dechashinon shema tzipori nazir tamei kibal alav. So we'll say, so again, Rabbi Meir will say that we're choshesh that maybe when he says Harei Alayt Tziporim, what type of tziporim? The bird offering that a Nazir Tameh would make. And I will say, take a look at Rashi. Eloheinu Tameh Rabbi Meir dechashinon ki amar Harei Alayt Tziporim the Dilma Kamer shebedaito lekabel alav midi dezimnin demaisi Alayt Tziporim tahainu nazirus. So interesting enough, the bird offerings, again, we'll discuss this. The bird offerings are actually mentioned in the context of a Nazir Tameh. And those comes Tameh. So Rabbi said, this is so much more pashut. Rabbi Yochanan says that according to Rabbi Meir, when you say Harei Alayt Nazir, Harei Alayt Tziporim, what are you referring to? To the birds that a Nazir Tameh brings. Okay, that's so much more explicit. In other words, we'll say that's what he's referring to. There are birds that are brought in the context of a neder nazirus. So when I say Harei Alayt Tziporim, I am referring to those particular birds. To which the Gemara says, well, let's analyze this. Michti chashinan ka'amar dilma tzipurin nedava kibel alav. So we'll say, but how do you know that? There are other times you could bring birds. For example, again, I will say, maybe he's offering a carbon nedava. Right, the gift offering. Maybe that's what's being offered over here. So the Maisa again, maybe that's what it means. Imkain Harei Alayt kan mibayle. I will say there's a different formulation for a nedava. Right, if you're offering bird nedavas, often the phrase that would be used would be a kan, would be like a nest. That would ultimately be the lashon. The fact that that is not the lashon that is being utilized here seems to indicate to us that Allah Maisa is indeed a neder nazirus. V'dilma Harei Alayt Tzipori Mitzora Ka'amar. So I'll say maybe the person is undertaking Tzipori Mitzora. We'll say a person who is undergoing the process or purification from tsaras would also bring bird offerings. So maybe the guy in question is taking upon himself the Tzipori Mitzora. Then I will say, now just to be clear, you can't voluntarily undertake Tzipori Mitzora. What you can do is sponsor a carbon. Right? You can sponsor a carbon. So I know my friend is a Mitzora. I would like to sponsor his carbonos. I have the ability to do that. So maybe that's what I'm undertaking over here. To which the Gemara says, Kigon, once again, Kigon Shahaya Nazir over Lefanav. Once again, I will say, what's the case? Situational clarity. I'm saying Harei Alayt Tziporim, and there's a Nazir walking right in front of me. So when I see Harei Alayt Tziporim, there's a Nazir walking right in front of me. So I will say, now situationally it's clarified that what am I doing? I'm undertaking a neder nazirus. Incredible. V'dilma Nazir Tameh lepochim in karbanos of kamar. But maybe the guy walking in front of me is a Nazir Tameh. And I say, when I see Harei Alayt Tziporim, what am I doing? I'm undertaking a willingness to pay for his karbanos. I'm sponsoring karbanos. Maybe that's what's unfolding over here. Kegon Shaya Nazir Tahar over the fun of. Then I will say, so here's what's interesting. We'll say, what's interesting over here is the bird offerings are associated with Nazir Tameh. So maybe the case over here is where what? The Nazir Tameh is walking in front of me, and I'm offering to bring his karbanos. No, what's the case? The case is where there's a Nazir Tahar walking in front of me. I say Harei Alayt Tziporim. So Rabbi say, interestingly enough, when I say Harei Alayt Tziporim, the understanding of my statement is taking upon myself a neder nazirus. Incredible. So Gemara says, "My benayu." So Rabbi says, so just the Gemara points out. So now there are just two different interpretations in the machlokes. So Rabbi says, so just to be clear, in our Mishnah, there's a machlokes. Who's the machlokes? Seen Rabbi Meir and the Rabbanon. Rabbi Meir says Harei Alayt Tziporim is a valid neder nazirus. The Rabbanon say no, it's not. Now we have two different machloksim. We have two different interpretations of the machlokes Rabbi Meir and the Rabbanon. In Reish Lakish's version of the machlokes, ultimately again the machlokes is matfis inish b'midei desamechle. Can you use juxtaposed terms in order to go and make a valid neder? According to Rabbi Yochanan, ultimately, again, that is not the machlokes. The machlokes ultimately is whether or not tziporim refer to tzipori nezer tameh or not. So again, just to point out, it's a machlokes in the interpretation of the machlokes. But the machlokes is still the same, right? Meir says, Hareya light siporim is a valid neder nazirus. The Rabbanan say, no, it's not. So the Gemara says, what's the nafkamina between these two approaches, Rabbi Yochanan and Reish Lakish? So ma'amina ikabenayu kigon da'amar siporin hasmuchin l'seyar alai. Listen to this. Let's say a person says, I hereby take upon myself the birds that are juxtaposed to the hair. Okay, so now watch this. So Rabbi Yochanan, afagav the amar haki. According to Rabbi Yochanan, even if you use, because Rabbi Yochanan says juxtaposed terms don't work. So therefore, according to Rabbi Yochanan, even if you said this, Nazir over the fun of in. If a Nazir is walking in front of me at the time I made that neder, fine. But low. But if not, it doesn't work. Rabbi Shimon Shlakish, afagav the ein Nazir over the fun of. But according to Reish Lakish, I will say, even if there's not a Nazir walking in front of me, such a juxtaposed statement will in fact still work. To which the Gemara says, but 1 second, I will say, is there such a thing as a person who rejects this concept of using juxtaposed term to create binding neder or shvua statements? After all, ha'omer yamin. We'll say a person says, I swear right, the right. Person is saying yamin, the right, harezu shvua. Ultimately, again, that's a shvua. That's the formulation of an oath. Why? My timer, lab mishum d'chsiv. Isn't that because the pasuk says he raised his right and his left to the heavens, and he swore? So you see over here that right is juxtaposed to shvuah, and if you say right, that's a shvuah. So you see, you could use a juxtaposed term to create the shvuah. To which the Gemara says, no. Amri lo mishum diyamin gufei ikri shvuah. No. It's because right itself is called shvuah. It's called an oath. V'sanya minayin la'omer yamim shu shvuah. How do you know that even if you just say right, that's called the shvuah? Shne'emar nishpa Hashem biyamino. Because it says he swore to Hashem with his right. So we see the right is literally called the shvuah. Uminayin la'omer small shi shvuah. And how do you know if you even use the left? That's also called shvuah. We'll get into this more in shvuah. Shne'emar ubizroa uzo. So just to tie this back. So halacha l'maisa, what comes out of here, we'll see the halacha l'maisa tomorrow, is there is a fundamental machlokes about matfis adam, matfis inishemidei samachle. Can you use a juxtaposed term in order to go ahead and create a binding neder or shvuah? So that is a machlokes, and ultimately Reish Lakish holds that is the fundamental machlokes in Rabbi Meir and the Rabbanon. Rabbi Yochanan, on the other hand, rejects that principle, and so we'll say, so we end off understanding that principle itself is subject to a machlokes. So I will say, ultimately, just want to point out, and then with this, the Rambam Paskins like the Rabbanon, that if a person says, Harei light siporim, that is not a valid statement and would ultimately not create an eder nazirus. The reason for that, Amir Tashem tomorrow, shkoyach.
Word for curls is tal